Iris sat beside the hospital bed, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. Damien Westbrook lay perfectly still, eyes closed, machines beeping steadily around him. She thought he couldn't hear her. She thought he was gone, lost somewhere in the depths of unconsciousness. But he heard every word. "I'm going to have to tell him no," Iris whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell my little brother that even though he's brilliant, even though he earned this, we can't afford it. MIT accepted him, full academic scholarship, and I can't give him the rest. $40,000 a year for room and board, and I've worked 3 jobs for 2 years and only saved $8,000. She looked up at Damien's still face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Your family talks about you like you're already dead, Mr. Westbrook, like you're just an obstacle to their inheritance. And here's my brother, who has everything ahead of him, and I can't give him the chance he deserves. Where's the fairness in that?" Damien's eyes opened. Iris gasped, stumbling backward, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mr. Westbrook, can you hear me? Can you see me?" His lips moved, and a single word emerged, rough and deliberate. "Wait." Her eyes went wide with shock, confusion, fear. "You can speak? Oh my God, I need to get the doctor. I need to." "Been awake," Damien interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with intention. 2 weeks, listening. The color drained from Iris's face. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. "You've been conscious this whole time?" "I said so many things. I talked about my personal life. Everything," he confirmed. "My wife, business partner, your brother, everything." But how did Damien Westbrook, one of the most powerful billionaires in New York, end up pretending to be unconscious in a hospital bed? And what did he hear that changed everything? Before we get into that, drop a comment right now, telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you're new here, subscribe to Mr. David Love Stories, because what you're about to hear will restore your faith in humanity. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. Let me take you back to where it all began. The stroke hit Damien Westbrook on a Tuesday afternoon at exactly 3:47 p.m. He was standing in his penthouse office on the 42nd floor of Westbrook Tower. The Manhattan skyline stretched out behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported Italian marble, furniture that cost more than most people's homes. He was on the phone, his voice sharp and cutting. "I don't care what their counteroffer is, Richard. We crush them, buy out their main supplier, tank their stock, and pick up the pieces when they collapse. That's how we win." The words were still leaving his mouth when his vision fractured. The phone slipped from his hand. His left side went completely numb, like someone had simply switched it off. The room tilted violently, and the marble floor rushed up to meet him. The impact was brutal. His executive assistant found him 15 minutes later, lying in a pool of his own saliva, eyes open but vacant, one side of his face drooping. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. The paramedics worked with efficient urgency, checking vitals, starting in 4, loading him onto a stretcher. Through it all, Damien was aware but unable to respond, trapped in a body that had betrayed him. At Mount Sinai Hospital, the neurologist delivered the diagnosis to Damien's family in a private consultation room. Severe ischemic stroke affecting the right hemisphere, significant brain swelling. They'd induced a medical coma to prevent further damage. The next 72 hours would determine if he survived, and if he did, what kind of life he'd have afterward. His wife, Claudia, sat in a leather chair, her Chanel suit perfectly pressed, her expression carefully neutral. She checked her phone twice during the doctor's explanation. "What are his chances?" she asked, her tone the same one she'd used to inquire about stock performance. 60-40, the neurologist replied. "The next week is critical, and if he wakes up..." This was Richard, Damien's business partner, standing near the door with his arms crossed. "Brain damage? Paralysis? Possible. We won't know the extent until he regains consciousness." "If he regains consciousness..." Claudia stood, smoothing her skirt with manicured hands. "Thank you, doctor. Keep us informed of any changes. My assistant will coordinate visiting hours." Just like that, they left. No tears, no hand-holding, no sitting vigil by his bedside. Just clinical efficiency and carefully managed optics. Damien remained in the induced coma for 3 days. On the 4th day, the medical team began reducing the sedation, allowing his brain to surface naturally. The doctors told his family it would be a gradual process. He might wake slowly, or not at all. But Damien woke on the fourth day, fully and completely. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasping for air or sudden movement. Consciousness simply returned, layer by layer, like a diver ascending from deep water. First came sensation, the scratch of sheets against his skin, the weight of blankets. Then sound, machines beeping, footsteps in the hallway, muffled voices beyond the door. Finally, thought, clear, sharp, undeniable thought. I'm alive. He tried to move and found his body sluggish but responsive. His left side was weak, nearly useless, but his right side functioned. He could flex his fingers, turn his head slightly. With effort, he could open his eyes. He was about to call for the nurse when he heard voices outside his door. Has there been any change? Claudia's voice, clipped and businesslike. No, ma'am. The nurse sounded tired, still unresponsive, though his vitals continued to improve. How long could this last? A man's voice now. Richard. Impossible to say, the nurse replied. Could be days, weeks, months. Some patients never regain consciousness. There was a pause. Then Claudia spoke again, her voice lower but still audible. Richard, we need to discuss the trust structure. If he's incapacitated beyond 6 months, the board can vote to transfer operational control. We need to position ourselves before Trevor catches wind and tries to make a claim. I've already spoken to 3 board members, Richard said. They're concerned about leadership stability. With Damien in this condition, they're open to restructuring the executive hierarchy. Good. The company can't be held hostage by someone who might never wake up. We need to think practically. Something cold and sharp twisted in Damien's chest. Not physical pain. Something worse. Recognition. He kept his eyes closed and listened. Over the next 2 days, he learned more about his life from those stolen conversations than he had in 20 years of living it. Claudia visited every morning. She stayed exactly 12 minutes. He knew, because he counted. 11 of those minutes were spent on phone calls with her lawyer, discussing asset protection, the postnuptial agreement they'd signed, and how to maximize her position if he remained incapacitated or died. On the second day, he heard another voice during her visit, a man who wasn't Richard or the medical staff. I miss you, the man said. When can we have dinner again? Soon, darling. Claudia's voice was warm in a way Damien hadn't heard in years. Once this situation stabilizes, we just need to be careful about appearances right now. His wife had a lover. Damien felt nothing. That's what shocked him most. Not anger, not betrayal, just a hollow recognition that their marriage had been a performance for so long. This was simply the truth of it. Richard came in the evenings, always with board members or company executives. They stood around Damien's bed like he was already a corpse, discussing how to divide his empire. The Huntington merger, if we flip it and sell to Richardson instead, we're looking at a $200 million differential, Richard explained to someone. Damien was building this deal to crush Richardson, but that was personal vendetta, not smart business. Won't the board question the reversal? The other voice asked. Damien's not here to explain his strategy. We present it as adapting to changing market conditions. They'll approve it. They were dismantling everything he'd built, and they were doing it standing 3 feet from his bed. His younger brother Trevor finally showed up on day 6. Damien heard him before he saw him, loud, slurring, clearly drunk. Look at you, big brother. The great Damien Westbrook, reduced to tubes and machines. Trevor's footsteps were unsteady as he approached the bed. You know what the worst part is? You're lying here, maybe dying, and my accounts are frozen. Your assistant says all discretionary funds are on hold pending your recovery. Do you know how humiliating it is to have my credit card declined at Nobu? Damien felt movement. Trevor had picked something up, a pillow. For one terrible moment, Damien's body tensed, preparing for something he couldn't fight. But Trevor just threw the pillow against the wall. 38 years old, and I still need permission to access my own money. Your money, I mean, always your money, your control. Even unconscious, you're still running my life. He left after that, stumbling into the hallway, his voice fading as he berated someone about getting him a car. Not one of them touched Damien with tenderness. Not one sat simply to be with him. Not one asked the doctors if he might be able to hear, if he might be suffering, if he might be afraid. They wanted him gone, or at least out of the way, and they were relieved someone else would handle the inconvenient reality of his dying body. That someone was Iris. The agency called her on a Sunday evening. Private care position, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. A comatose patient requiring monitoring, basic care, and companionship. The family wanted someone reliable, discreet, and compassionate. The pay was $40 an hour, nearly 3 times her other positions. Iris Delgado had been in New York for exactly 2 years, living in a 4th-floor walk-up in Washington Heights with her younger brother. She worked at a bakery on weekends, cleaned offices in Midtown twice a week overnight, and picked up nursing assistant shifts wherever she could find them. Every dollar beyond basic survival went into a savings account labeled MIT. This job, if she took it, could change everything. She accepted immediately. The agency briefed her the next morning. Damian Westbrook, stroke patient. Day 7, post-incident. Unresponsive, but stable. Family visits occasionally, but prefers professional care. Standard protocols for coma patients. They didn't tell her he was a billionaire. They didn't mention the family dynamics. They just gave her the room number and wished her luck. Iris arrived at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, carrying a canvas bag with her lunch, a thermos of tea, and a small journal with a blue cover. The nurse at the station barely looked up. Mr. Westbrook, room 412. Vitals every 2 hours. Rotation every 2 hours to prevent bed sores, standard hygiene protocols. He's unresponsive, but some people talk to them anyway. Can't hurt. Any signs of consciousness? Iris asked. The nurse shrugged. Brain activity is present, but he's not home, if you know what I mean. Family's been told not to expect much. Iris nodded and walked down the quiet hallway. She paused outside room 412, took a breath, and stepped inside. The room was sterile, all beeping machines and antiseptic smell. The man in the bed looked younger than she expected. Mid-40s, dark hair with threads of silver, strong features softened by stillness. His hands lay limp on top of the blanket, hands that had clearly never done manual labor. She approached slowly and set her bag down. "Hello, Mr. Westbrook." Her voice was soft, warm, shaped by Spanish vowels and careful English pronunciation. "My name is Iris Delgado. I'm going to be taking care of you." Damian heard everything. The gentle accent, the respectful tone. Something in her voice was different from every other person who'd entered this room. "I know you probably can't hear me," Iris continued, "but I'm going to talk to you anyway. My abuela, my grandmother, she always said that souls can hear even when bodies can't. So I'll treat you like you're listening, Mr. Westbrook, with respect." She took his hand then, and Damian felt calluses on her palm. A working woman's hand, honest and real. "First, let me check your vitals." She worked through the routine with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure, pulse, oxygen levels, temperature. Then she adjusted his pillows, straightened the sheets, and wiped his face with a warm cloth that smelled faintly of lavender. "There," she said, satisfied. "More comfortable, yes?" She settled into the chair beside his bed with a soft sigh. "I'll tell you about myself, Mr. Westbrook, so you don't feel like you're being cared for by a stranger. I came to New York 2 years ago from a small town in New Mexico you've never heard of. Tierra Dulce, sweet earth. Population, maybe 3,000. The sky there is so big it makes you feel small, but in a good way, like you're part of something larger than yourself." Damian listened, his awareness expanding beyond the confines of his own trapped body. "I came here for my brother, Mateo. He's 16 now, brilliant, wants to be an engineer. Our parents died when I was 22 and he was 12. Car accident on the interstate. Black ice. They were gone in an instant." Her voice caught slightly, then steadied. "I became his legal guardian. We managed okay back home for a while, but the schools there, they're good people doing their best, but they couldn't give Mateo what he needed. He was solving college-level calculus problems at 13, building robots from spare parts he found at the junkyard. I knew if he stayed there, his potential would be wasted." She paused, and Damian heard liquid being poured. "Tea, from the smell. So I saved every penny for 2 years, and we came here. Mateo got into a special STEM program at a magnet school in Brooklyn. Full scholarship for tuition. But everything else, housing, food, books, metro cards, that's on us. I work 3 jobs, Mr. Westbrook. This one, the bakery on weekends, and cleaning offices twice a week overnight. I sleep about 4 hours a night. But when Mateo shows me his robotics project, or tells me about the science competition his team won, or talks about college like it's actually possible, every exhausted moment is worth it. The raw, unconditional love in her voice struck Damien like a physical force. When was the last time someone had spoken about him with even a fraction of that devotion? Never. The answer was never. I'll be here 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, Iris said. So we'll get to know each other, you and I. I promise I'll take good care of you, Mr. Westbrook. That's not just my job, that's my word. And she did. Over the next 3 weeks, Iris transformed room 412. She opened the blinds every morning to let natural light flood in. She brought flowers, cheap carnations from the grocery store that she paid for herself, and set them in a plastic vase on the windowsill. She played music softly from her phone, acoustic guitar pieces and old boleros that filled the sterile space with unexpected beauty. She talked to him constantly, not aimlessly, but with intention, like he was a friend. She told him about Mateo's struggles with English when they first arrived, how he'd watched American TV shows obsessively until he could speak without an accent, about their tiny apartment, 4th floor walk-up, where the heating was inconsistent but the neighbors looked out for each other, about her mother's recipe for pozole she made every Sunday, their one ritual that connected them to home. She read to him too, from the journal with the blue cover. Poetry, Mary Oliver, Pablo Neruda, Rumi. Her voice shaped the words with such tenderness that even the simplest phrases became profound. Listen to this one, she said one afternoon during the 2nd week. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. She was quiet for a long moment. I think about that a lot, Mr. Westbrook. The dark gifts. Losing my parents was the worst thing that ever happened to me. The absolute worst. But it taught me what matters. Who the first want to be. It showed me that love isn't something you say. It's something you do. Every single day, even when you're exhausted. Maybe especially then. Sometimes we need the darkness to see what we couldn't before. To become who we're meant to be. Something cracked open in Damien's chest. A fissure in the armor he'd spent decades building. During the 3rd week, Claudia came during Iris's shift. She swept in wearing designer sunglasses and visible irritation, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. She barely glanced at the bed. "Any change?" she asked Iris, her tone making it clear she expected none and cared less. "His vitals are strong and improving," Iris replied carefully. "I believe he can hear us, Mrs. Westbrook. I've noticed his heart rate changes when people speak to him. There might be more awareness than the doctors." Claudia laughed. It was sharp, dismissive, cruel. "The help doesn't need to believe anything, sweetheart. Just keep him alive until the lawyers finish sorting out the estate." She turned toward the door, then paused. "And don't mention your little theories to anyone else. The last thing we need is false hope complicating the medical decisions we need to make." She left, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. Iris sat in silence for a long moment. Then she took Damien's hand and held it between both of hers. Her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry that the people who should love you don't. Not the way you deserve. Not the way anyone deserves." If Damien could have wept, he would have. The breaking point came during the 4th week. Iris arrived one morning with red eyes and a heaviness that hung around her like a cloak. She went through the routine mechanically. Vitals, rotation, hygiene. But there were no stories, no music, no poetry, just silence. Finally, she sat down heavily in the chair. "Forgive me, Mr. Westbrook. I'm not good company today." She stared at her hands for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "Mateo got his acceptance letter yesterday. MIT, early admission, full academic scholarship." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "It's everything we've dreamed of, everything we've worked for." He called me at the bakery, screaming with joy. The other workers thought something terrible had happened because I just started crying. Damien waited, confused. This was good news. Extraordinary news. Why did she sound devastated? "The scholarship covers tuition," Iris continued. "All 4 years, completely covered. but it doesn't cover room and board, doesn't cover books, student fees, health insurance, lab costs. Any of it. We'd need $40,000 a year. 40,000, Mr. Westbrook. Her voice broke completely. I've been working 3 jobs for 2 years, sleeping 4 hours a night, and I've saved $8,000. I looked at loans. I don't qualify for enough. My credit isn't good enough. Mateo could take out student loans, but that would bury him. He'd graduate with almost $200,000 in debt. How is that fair? How is that right? She put her face in her hands. I have to tell him no. I have to tell my brilliant little brother, who has worked so hard, who earned this, that we can't afford it, that he has to choose the state school that offered partial scholarship instead. It's a good school. It's a blessing. I know that. But Mr. Westbrook, if you could see him when he talks about artificial intelligence and sustainable energy systems, he has the kind of mind that could actually change things, really change the world. And I have to clip his wings because I'm not enough. She looked up at Damien then, tears streaming down her face. Your wife, your family, they talk about you like you're already gone, like you're just an obstacle between them and money they feel entitled to. They have everything and value nothing. And here's my brother, who has so much life ahead of him, so much potential, and I can't give him the chance he's earned. Where's the fairness in that? Where's the justice? Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not angry at you, Mr. Westbrook. You've never done anything but lie here while I talked your ear off, but I'm angry at the world, at the unfairness of it, at how some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple, while others run twice as fast and never make it to first. She stood abruptly, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. That was completely inappropriate. You're my patient, not my therapist. I'll just get back to work. She turned away, composing herself with visible effort. Damien made his decision in that moment. He'd been pretending for 4 weeks, listening, observing, learning the truth of his life. He'd built an empire that would continue for generations, and not one person mourned the man. They only circled the money like vultures, except this woman, this stranger who owed him nothing, who worked herself to exhaustion for a brother's dream, who spoke to his unconscious body with more genuine compassion than his wife had shown in a decade. The dark gift. That's what Iris had called it. The box of darkness that teaches you what you couldn't see before. He'd been given that gift. Now he knew exactly what to do with it. If you're feeling this story, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling us what you think Damien should do. And make sure you're subscribed to Mr. David Love Stories, because what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. You don't want to miss this. The next morning, when Iris arrived carrying fresh flowers, Damien opened his eyes. She gasped, the carnations falling from her hand and scattering across the floor. Mr. Westbrook, can you hear me? Can you see me? He managed a small nod. His muscles screamed from weeks of minimal use, but he pushed through. Oh my God. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I need to get the doctor. Don't move. Just stay calm. Wait. The word came out as barely more than a breath, rough and halting. But she heard it. She froze, her eyes going wide. You can speak? You're really conscious? Been awake, Damien said. Each word an effort. 2 weeks. Listening. Understanding crashed over her face like a wave. Shock, then embarrassment, then fear. You've been conscious this whole time? I said so many things. I talked about my personal life, about Mateo, about your family. I shouldn't have. I'm so sorry. Don't. He lifted his right hand slightly, the most movement he could manage. Don't apologize. But everything. He met her eyes directly. My wife, Richard, everything you said about your brother. I heard everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why stay silent? Needed to know. Know what? Who they were. His voice was getting stronger, fueled by purpose. Who the first had become, built an empire, lost everything that matters. Iris knelt beside the bed, professional instinct warring with confusion on her face. Mr. Westbrook, you need medical attention. Let me call the doctor. Let me. Your brother, he interrupted. Might. I can help. She went very still. No. She shook her head firmly. No, Mr. Westbrook. I didn't tell you that to ask for anything, I would never. I know. That's exactly why. She pulled her hand away from the bed rail. I can't accept charity. Matteo and I, we take care of ourselves. We don't take handouts. Not charity, Damien said. Investment. I don't understand. Lawyers. Trust fund. Ken set up. Full scholarship. 4 years. Room. Board. Everything. Mr. Westbrook. 45 years, he continued, his voice growing more passionate. Spent it all building wealth by crushing competitors, measuring success in market share. Never once did something simply because it was good, because it mattered. He held her gaze. Your brother has potential, real potential. You've sacrificed everything to protect that. It's the most valuable thing I've witnessed in my entire fortune-filled life. Let me do this, not as charity, as my chance to do one good thing with this money, one thing that isn't about profit or control or legacy, just good. Please, this is too much, Iris whispered. Everyone in my life wants something from me, Damien said. Money, status, power, control. You wanted nothing. You gave kindness anyway, gave it to a man you thought couldn't hear. That's worth more than any merger I've ever executed. Iris was openly crying now. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Let me do this one good thing. Please. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. Yes. But only if you let me call the doctor right now. You need proper treatment, rehabilitation, actual medical care. Deal. She stood, moved toward the door, then turned back. Mr. Westbrook, thank you for Matteo, for this incredible gift. But also, I think you waking up, choosing to wake up and change, that's a gift too, to yourself. After she left, Damien lay in the silence and felt the weight of his decision settle over him. The doctors would come soon, then Claudia and Richard, with their shock and their barely concealed disappointment that he'd survived to complicate their plans. The battles ahead would be brutal. Divorce proceedings, corporate restructuring, cutting off the parasites who'd circled his sickbed discussing his assets, rebuilding a life that actually meant something. But he'd heard Iris's voice in his darkness, heard her speak about real love, real sacrifice, the things that truly mattered. He'd been given a box full of darkness, and inside it, he'd found the truth of his own emptiness. Now, finally, he had the chance to fill it with light. The door burst open, and the medical team flooded in, all urgent voices and efficient movement. Through the chaos of examinations and questions, Damien caught sight of Iris standing in the corner. Their eyes met across the crowded room. She smiled at him, warm, genuine, proud. And he understood the final lesson she'd taught him without even knowing. Wealth isn't measured in what you accumulate, but in what you give away. Legacy isn't buildings with your name carved in stone. It's lives changed by your choices. And sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never see coming. 3 months later, Matteo Delgado received an acceptance packet from the Westbrook Foundation for Academic Excellence. Full scholarship to MIT, all expenses covered for 4 years. The letter explained that the foundation, funded entirely by Damien Westbrook's personal wealth, would support 50 students annually, young people with brilliant minds and empty pockets, given the chance to change the world. Iris tried to resign when the scholarship was finalized. She insisted she'd only been hired temporarily, that Damien had recovered enough to not need daily care. He hired her as the foundation's director instead. You know what matters, he told her in his new office, smaller than the old one, in a building that didn't bear his name. You know how to spot the students who need this most. I can write the checks, but I need you to find the dreams worth funding. She accepted on one condition. You have to meet every scholarship recipient, personally, hear their stories, see their faces, understand the lives you're changing. Why? He asked. Because you need to know them, not as investments or tax deductions or line items in a budget, as people, as dreams. Promise me. He promised. On the day Matteo left for Cambridge, Iris brought him to meet Damien. The young man was nervous, his gratitude almost overwhelming. He shook Damien's hand with both of his own. Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. I won't waste this opportunity. I promise you. I know you won't, Damien replied. But do me a favor. When you've built something extraordinary, When you've made your mark on this world, remember this moment. Remember that someone believed in you when you needed it most. And do the same for someone else someday. Matteo nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I will. I promise I will. After they left, Damien stood at the window of his office and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Claudia was spending her divorce settlement. Richard was facing federal charges for embezzlement and fraud. Trevor had been cut off completely and was, for the first time in his life, learning to support himself. And Damien was learning to be the kind of man worth waking up for. The stroke had been the box of darkness. Inside it, he'd found Iris's voice speaking truth when everyone else spoke lies. She'd shown him what he'd lost by measuring life in profit margins instead of moments that mattered. What he'd missed by building walls instead of bridges. His phone buzzed. A text from Iris. First round of applications for next year just came in. 847 students. All of them brilliant. All of them deserving. This is going to be impossible and wonderful. Damien smiled and typed back. Then let's get to work. We've got dreams to fund. He set the phone down and returned to the window. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He'd once tried to conquer this city, to own it, to make it bow to his will. Now he was learning to serve it instead. The box of darkness had taught him well, and the light that came after was sweeter than anything he'd ever bought. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment with the biggest lesson you're taking from Damien's journey, and tell us, what would you do with a second chance? Subscribe to Mr. David Love Stories for more powerful narratives that remind us what it means to be truly human. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective. Because sometimes, the most valuable things in life are the ones that can't be bought. They can only be given.